My parents wanted me to support my sister marrying my ex-husband and took his side, so I walked away, and the truth shattered them before the wedding. 2 years ago, I was married to a loser named Ron. I'm not using this term lightly or out of spite. It's the only word that truly captures how toxic and draining he was as a partner. He was, without a doubt, the most emotionally, mentally, and financially exhausting person I have ever been involved with. The worst part is that I was so blinded by love and hope at the time that I gave him my all, everything I had to give and then some. It feels almost unbelievable now to say that I literally poured my blood, sweat, and tears into making our relationship work, only for him to take without giving anything back. Ron and I dated for 3 years before getting married. During that time, he never managed to hold down a proper job, which was frustrating, but at least back then, he seemed to be trying. He would take on odd jobs here and there and claimed he was working towards something better. I chose to believe him because we were still young, and I thought his ambition would eventually lead somewhere. Then life threw us a curveball. I found out I was pregnant. This was unexpected, as we were not even trying. I didn't even have enough time to think about my choices before Ron started pressuring me to get married. He insisted it was important to him that our child be born within a proper family. He said he wanted to do the right thing for me and the baby. At the time, it felt like a romantic and honorable gesture. I was already emotionally invested in him, and I wanted to believe in the dream of building a happy family together. Foolishly, I agreed to marry him, thinking it was the best decision for all of us. But if our relationship had cracks before, the marriage turned them into wide gaps. Almost immediately after we tied the knot, things began to unravel. What little effort Ron had been putting into our relationship before disappeared entirely, and his true colors began to shine through. Far from stepping up as a husband and soon-to-be father, he seemed to think that getting married gave him a free pass to stop trying altogether. Ron started spending every penny he earned, either gambling or drinking. This was a daily occurrence. He would stay out until the late hours of the morning, hanging out with random people at bars. Meanwhile, I was pregnant, working full-time, and desperately trying to keep us afloat. Despite my condition, I shouldered the responsibility for all our bills, household expenses, and everything else that came with preparing for a baby. I kept telling myself that things would get better and that Ron would wake up to his responsibilities eventually. But I was wrong. He never helped me. One night, I woke up feeling horribly unwell. A wave of panic surged through me as I realized I was bleeding. I could feel it running down my thighs, and deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. My first instinct was to call Ron for help. But as usual, he wasn't home. I called him repeatedly, hoping that he would pick up and come to my aid. But when he finally answered, he flat out refused to take me to the hospital. He told me that it was probably nothing and I should not disturb him when he was out with his friends. He scolded me for being dramatic. At that moment, I realized I couldn't rely on him, not even in a dire emergency. I had no choice but to drive myself to the hospital, trembling with fear and pain the entire way. The doctors confirmed my worst fear. I had suffered a miscarriage. My baby, the little life I had been nurturing and dreaming about, was gone. I felt like I could not breathe and didn't know what to do. And to make matters worse, when Ron found out about my miscarriage, he blamed me for the loss of our child. He had the audacity to suggest that it was somehow my fault, that my body had failed, or worse, that I had done something to cause it. His words were like knives twisting in wounds that were already unbearable. I was already drowning in guilt, questioning every move I had made during my pregnancy. And here was the man who was supposed to be my partner pouring salt on my deepest wounds. He even told me that God had taken the child away from me and given it to someone else who was more deserving. For weeks after the miscarriage, I lived in grief and shame. I would cry for hours in bed, unable to even get up and go to work. Ron didn't try to console me or help me process the loss. Instead, he only made me feel worse, as though I was somehow unworthy of even basic compassion. He would act disgusted whenever he saw my face. I was the one who had to finally pick myself up and try to distract myself with work. Despite what I was going through, I knew we needed the money. Then, Ron lost his job due to his company's downsizing. After this, our situation worsened. Instead of using this setback as motivation to find another job or contribute to our household in any meaningful way, he just gave up. He started to spend all day every day at home playing video games. He would leave dirty dishes, empty cans, and trash everywhere, turning our home into a pigsty, and then act like it wasn't his responsibility to clean any of it. He didn't lift a finger to help around the house, not even the bare minimum. Months of living like this took a serious toll on me, both physically and emotionally. I felt trapped in a never-ending cycle of misery and despair. I became so overwhelmed by the weight of it all that I came dangerously close to ending my own life twice. But somehow, through sheer willpower, I pulled myself back from the edge. Despite knowing that I was sick and utterly drained, Ron continued to expect me to cook for him, clean up after him, and cater to his every whim. It didn't matter how exhausted or unwell I felt, he demanded everything from me while giving absolutely nothing in return. My pleas for help fell on deaf ears, and any attempt to talk about how his behavior was affecting me was met with dismissiveness or outright hostility. One day, I just realized that something had to change. I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for someone who treated me so horribly. I needed to get out of this marriage before it destroyed me completely. When I finally gathered the courage to ask Ron for a divorce, he turned violent. He beat me up very badly. As if that wasn't enough, he then took away my car keys, phone, and wallet to ensure I couldn't leave our home without his permission. He threatened me, saying he would never allow me to divorce him and that I had no choice but to stay with him forever and continue to pay for everything, no matter how miserable I was. But the next day, while he was asleep, I escaped somehow and called the police from my neighbor's place. Thankfully, the police arrived, and Ron was arrested. Because this was his first offense, the court ordered him to attend mandatory anger management classes, but that was it. He didn't face jail time or any significant repercussions for the way he had treated me. However, this did give me grounds to divorce him. After a lot of back and forth with him trying to stall, manipulate, and make things as difficult as possible for me, I got my wish. Our divorce was finalized. I walked away without taking a single penny from him. Not because I didn't deserve compensation for all I had been through, but because I wanted nothing tying me to him. I wanted a clean break, one where I could leave the toxicity of that chapter of my life far behind. As soon as the divorce was settled, I packed up my life and moved to a different city, far, far away from him. Since that move, I have completely cut off all contact with Ron. Throughout all this, I only told my parents bits and pieces of what I was going through. At the time, I wasn't ready to share the full extent of my pain and suffering. Maybe I was ashamed. Or maybe I was trying to protect them from the truth. But only after the divorce was finalized and I had begun to heal, I felt ready to finally tell them everything. When I opened up to my family about everything that had happened with Ron, they were shocked. My parents especially were heartbroken to learn what I had endured all on my own. My younger sister Karen also seemed sympathetic. Now 2 years have passed since my divorce, and my life has completely turned around. I have a much better job than I did before, and I earn a solid income that allows me to live comfortably. It feels like I finally regained control of my life and my future. Since I have a comfortable lifestyle now, I've been able to send some money back home to my parents. You see, my parents have both retired, so I want them to enjoy the rest of their lives comfortably without any financial stress. My sister Karen still lives with our parents. She's a high school dropout with a history of drug use. Though she manages to get clean and stabilize her life to some extent, she still has a long way to go. She now works as a server at a local diner and lives with our parents to save on rent and other expenses. I'm well aware that the money I sent home also helps her out indirectly, and I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, they're my family, and I want them to be okay. This week, my parents called me with some big news. I could hear the excitement in their voices, which made me curious. They informed me that my sister Karen was getting married. I was really surprised because I had no idea she was even dating anyone. So, I naturally asked who the lucky guy was. That's when my parents hesitated a bit. There was a long pause before they nervously said they needed me to promise not to overreact when they told me more about the guy. I immediately felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. What could possibly warrant such a warning? And then they told me Karen was getting married to my ex-husband Ron. I was completely stunned. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. My sister, my own sister, was planning to marry the very man who had caused me so much pain and trouble. Drama. I thought there must be some kind of mistake. I asked them if they were joking, half hoping they would laugh and admit it was all some ridiculous prank. But they weren't joking. My mom said this was true and how Karen and the family had avoided telling me sooner because they knew I'd be this upset. Apparently, they wanted to soften the blow by waiting to give me this big news. She then went on to tell me how Karen and Ron had met accidentally a few months ago when Ron had come into the diner where Karen works. And what began as a casual encounter turned into a friendship, and that so-called friendship quickly blossomed into a full-blown romance between them. According to my mom, it's only been a few months, but they're already completely in love with each other. Hearing this felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Karen had not only started a relationship with him, but had also decided to marry him, knowing full well he was my ex, knowing full well what he had put me through. And Ron, the man who had made my life a living hell, was now set to become my brother-in-law. What was even happening? I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could my family think this was even remotely okay? How could Karen justify being with someone who had been so cruel to her own sister? And why had no one thought it was important to tell me sooner? Their secrecy felt like a betrayal in itself, as if they had all conspired to keep me in the dark until it was too late for me to voice any concerns. I sat on the phone in stunned silence as my mom continued talking, trying to urge me to accept them. She said that Ron seemed to have changed and that Karen believed in his ability to be a better person. Mom even mentioned how happy Karen looked and that maybe I should try to see this as a chance for a fresh start for everyone involved. But honestly, I just felt like I was going to vomit. The very thought of Karen marrying Ron made me physically ill. I tried to argue with my mom, trying to make her understand that Karen didn't know who Ron really was. She couldn't possibly know the kind of man he truly was until she would have to face the same trauma. I told her that she and Dad should have talked sense into Karen, discouraging her from pursuing a relationship with someone as toxic and violent as him. To my shock, my dad admitted that he had tried once or twice, but Karen had been adamant about her decision. Then Mom dropped another bombshell. She revealed that Ron had already met with them for dinner some time ago. And apparently during that dinner, he'd spun some ridiculous narrative about how I was actually at fault for our divorce. According to Ron, I had made his life difficult and got him arrested for no reason. My mom then went on to tell me that it was unfair of me to blame Ron entirely for the divorce. She suggested that I should take some responsibility, too. I was absolutely floored. How could my own mother even entertain the idea that this was somehow my fault? That guy had literally beaten me up. How could she, of all people, take his word over mine after everything I had confided in her? My dad then chimed in, asking me if perhaps I hadn't moved on from Ron yet. He asked me if I was still in love with him or something, which was why I was having difficulty accepting his relationship with my sister. Of course, I had moved on, but this wasn't about moving on. It was about my sister dragging that toxic man back into our lives and my parents acting like it was no big deal. When I told Dad as much, his response was infuriating. He said that if I truly had moved on, then I shouldn't have a problem accepting their relationship. He argued that Karen and Ron were adults and if they wanted to get married, it was their decision and not ours. According to him, I needed to stop making this about myself. Then my mom urged me to let bygones be bygones. She said I should be happy and supportive of my sister, especially since Karen had been too scared to tell me about her relationship with Ron in the first place. But now that they were getting married, they hoped that I would accept them and join their celebration. Hearing this only fueled my anger. My sister wasn't scared because she thought I'd be unreasonable. She was clearly scared because deep down she knew this was wrong. She knew what Ron had done to me and she still chose to be with him. Now they were all trying to guilt me into being supportive. I was so furious and hurt that I couldn't take it anymore. I cut the call. Since then, my phone has been blowing up with texts and calls from my parents. They've been calling me selfish for not being happy for my sister. They've accused me of holding a grudge and refusing to see how Ron has supposedly changed. Instead of standing by me, my family is pressuring me to welcome this man back into my life, ignoring everything I've been through. Let me just clarify. I'm not just appalled that Karen is planning to marry Ron. I'm utterly horrified that she's chosen to associate herself with a man like him in the first place. This is a man who has caused immense pain and suffering in my life. A man who blamed me for the miscarriage of our child as though it was something I had control over. A man who didn't care enough to take me to the hospital when I was bleeding and scared. A man who beat me when I tried to leave and threatened to hurt me more if I dared to disobey him. He was someone who never contributed to our household or our relationship in any meaningful way. And yet he drained me emotionally, physically, and financially. Knowing all this, it's devastating to think that my own sister would even entertain the idea of being with him, let alone marrying him. How could she possibly justify being with a man like that? How could she think he's a safe or reliable partner after everything he's done? What's worse is that Ron has somehow managed to manipulate not just Karen, but also my parents into believing some twisted version of events. He's made them think that I was partly at fault for our divorce, as if I didn't try everything I could to make our marriage work before finally realizing it was a lost cause. The fact that my own family is even entertaining these lies feels like a deep betrayal. As the oldest sibling, I've always felt a certain responsibility towards Karen. Even though we've had our ups and downs, I've always cared about her and wanted the best for her. That's why this situation is so painful for me. I can't stand by and watch her make the same mistakes I did, especially with a man as dangerous and toxic as Ron. She doesn't deserve the kind of life I endured. No one does. I know that simply staying silent and cutting them off won't solve anything. As much as I feel hurt and betrayed by my family right now, I can't just turn my back on them without at least trying to talk some sense into them first. That's why I decided to schedule a video call with my parents and Karen sometime this week. I want to confront them directly about this situation. I need to make them understand exactly what Ron is and what he's capable of. I'll remind them of everything I went through because of him, the abuse, the manipulation, the trauma, and I'll plead with them to see reason before it's too late. This won't be an easy conversation. I know I'll face resistance, and I know there's a chance they won't listen to me, but I have to try. For my own peace of mind, I need to know that I did everything I could to protect my sister from making this catastrophic mistake. After this, if she still chooses to go through with this marriage, then at least I'll know that I tried my best. Well, the video call with my family didn't go the way I had hoped. In fact, it turned into a nightmare. I gathered all the evidence I had, including the medical records documenting the abuse I had suffered at Ron's hands. I had never shown my family this, but this time I wanted to show them irrefutable proof of the pain and suffering he had caused me, not as a way to make it about myself, but to warn Karen about what kind of man she was dealing with. I laid everything out as clearly and calmly as I could along with my records, recounting the years of trauma I endured, and expressing my genuine fear that she might face the same fate. But instead of understanding or even sympathy, Karen immediately went on the defensive. She argued that Ron had suffered just as much as I had during our marriage and accused me of being an attention seeker, claiming that I was using my past experiences to gain sympathy from everyone. She told me how Ron had told her that I was the one who had instigated him to lash out at me and that I had been wrong to call the police on him when he physically assaulted me. She mocked me, saying that maybe it was for the best that I lost my baby with Ron because clearly I wasn't meant to be his wife for a long time or a mother to his child. Hearing this was devastating. I couldn't believe that my own sister could say something so heartless and dismissive to me about one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. The one thing I did notice was throughout the call, my parents mostly stayed quiet. When they did speak, it was to try to calm us down rather than take a firm stance. I needed them to stand up for me, to see the truth, but instead they seemed more concerned about keeping the peace and agreeing with my sister. My dad assured me that they'd keep a close eye on Ron to ensure he wouldn't harm Karen like he harmed me. I asked him about how he would do that, and this is when Dad informed me that apparently Ron was supposed to move in with them after his marriage with Karen. I argued with Dad that this was a very bad idea. However, Dad yelled that it was his house, so it was up to him and not me to decide who could or couldn't live there. He told me that it was the right decision for Ron to move into Karen's room after the wedding since they didn't have a place of their own yet. My parents claimed that this arrangement would allow Karen and Ron to save money while also they could keep a watch over them. I warned my parents that once they let him in, he'd never leave. Ron is a freeloader, plain and simple. The moment he gets comfortable, he'll find every excuse to stay, draining their resources and bringing chaos into their home. They were opening the door to disaster. I asked my parents if they had truly thought this through. Did they really believe that Ron had changed? Did they think they could somehow manage him better than I could despite everything he had done to me? My mom brushed off my concerns, telling me that maybe he wasn't as much in love with me as he was with my sister, and that perhaps this time he would be better. I scoffed, my frustration boiling over. I told my parents in no uncertain terms that if this was how they were going to handle things, then I could not sit by and watch. I am against Ron and Karen's relationship, and I no longer wanted to have any part of it. I said that if they wanted to continue supporting Karen and Ron's twisted relationship and let him move in with them, then that was their choice. But moving forward, I would be cutting off contact with them as I didn't want to be part of a family that supported my abuser. I also informed them that I would no longer send them any money. I didn't want to support my family along with Ron anymore. When my parents heard this, they immediately started arguing with me, saying that it was unfair for me to cut them off as their child. They said I should support them no matter what. Karen also argued that even if I wanted to stop talking with them, I should at least have the decency to continue sending them money. She pointed out how she was planning to leave her job and focus on becoming a stay-at-home wife for Ron and needed my money more than ever since Ron still didn't earn well enough. The audacity of it all was staggering. I pointed out bluntly that if she wanted to live that lifestyle, then Ron should be the one to fund it, not me. It's not my responsibility to bankroll her choices, especially not after her decision to get married to him. Karen then screamed at me, accusing me of punishing them out of jealousy. She said I was cutting them off simply because she had lost Ron to me and that I was still stuck in the past. Her words felt like a slap in the face. However, I stood my ground. I was done being the one to hold everything together for them while they made disastrous decisions. I refused to let her and my parents manipulate me any further. The more they argued, the more resolute I became with my decision to cut them off. I was done, and I meant it. Since that conversation, true to my words, I've completely cut ties with my family. It's not a decision I've made lightly, and the pain of it still lingers. But I know it was the right choice for me. What they have done to me is unforgivable. Now I need to protect my peace, my sanity, and my future. And if that means walking away from the people I love, then so be it. Okay, so I have just found out from some of my cousins that Karen and Ron have ended things. Apparently, Karen caught him cheating just a week before their wedding was about to take place. And from what I've heard, she went completely ballistic on him. Given everything I know about Ron, it's no surprise really. He's obviously a liar, manipulator, and a cheater. But I can't help but feel a small sense of vindication. I was right about him. He still hasn't changed. Anyway, ever since the breakup, my parents have been doing everything they can to get in touch with me. They've apparently been begging my relatives to talk to me, asking them to convince me to open up communication with them. Now that Karen and Ron are no longer getting married, they want to fix things between us, to smooth things over, and to get me back into their lives, but I'm standing firm in my decision. I'm not going to let them back in. I'm pretty sure all they want from me is my money. Their sudden change of heart has nothing to do with their concern for me. It's about their need to have me back in the fold so I can keep supporting them and my sister financially. Well, that's not going to happen. My life is going so much better now without my family. My career is thriving, and I have also started dating someone new. Currently, I'm not willing to risk my peace just because my family is scrambling to fix their mistakes. They were toxic, and I've seen how quickly they turned on me to defend Ron and Karen's bad decisions. For anyone who might be concerned about my safety, please don't worry. Ron cannot show up at my place. I live in a secure apartment with cameras everywhere. If he ever does show up, believe me, I will get him arrested, and this time we'll make sure he goes to prison. It's been 6 months since my last update. I don't know if anyone's still following this story, but I just wanted to update that my parents sent me an email recently saying that my dad had been in an accident and broken his hand. They're claiming that some of the medical bills aren't fully covered by insurance, and apparently they've fallen behind on some other bills now. They want me to pay for everything. They're also whining about how Karen isn't helping them with anything, which shocker doesn't surprise me at all. What really gets me, though, is the sudden wave of apology they're throwing at me. Apparently, they're realizing how wrong they were all those months ago, and how they treated me badly for no reason. They even mentioned how they should have listened to me about Ron and how sorry they were for pushing me away. They're acting like I owe them something just because my dad got hurt. Where was their concern before when they sided with him over me? Oh, how convenient. Now that they need something, they finally acknowledge their mistakes. Too little, too late, I don't care anymore. The last thing I'm going to do is let them back into my life. This isn't about their health or their bills. It's about them trying to manipulate me into giving them money again. So, even after that email, I have chosen not to respond, and I don't plan to. They can figure things out on their own.